This is for founders, CEOs, CTOs, and engineering or operational leaders in expert-led technical organizations. I mean businesses in aerospace, defense, advanced manufacturing, infrastructure, cloud, and data centers, and similar environments where a small number of capable people carry a great deal of critical knowledge. Company size matters less than the operating condition. Scarce specialists sit in critical paths, information has real boundaries, and weak decisions can affect customers, cost, quality, or safety. The pattern is normally the same. Those people spend too much time finding information, rebuilding evidence, answering familiar questions, crossing difficult handoffs, and rescuing repeatable work. Teams are already trying AI, but leadership cannot yet see what is safe, useful, or worth scaling. That is the problem I help solve. I am not selling a chatbot or a license rollout, and I do not promise autonomous replacement of accountable experts. I run a paid, bounded Discover engagement to find one or two workflows where AI could release expert capacity without weakening quality, accountability, intellectual property, or customer trust. A named C-level sponsor sets the boundary. A short fit conversation tells us whether it is worth going further. 5 very different operating environments taught me the same discipline. Understand the real system before trying to change it. At the CSIR, I learned regulated long horizon engineering. Through Crypto Labs, I learned emerging infrastructure by building and operating it. At Vast.ai, I learned the reality of a global GPU cloud. At Hydra Host, I turned specialist knowledge into repeatable fleet automation. Extreme Lights is the founder part of the story. I founded the Extreme Lights brand in 2010, designed the products and built the manufacturing, importing, supply chain, e-commerce, marketing, distribution, and support around them. By the time I sold it in 2017, the business was producing more than 10 million rand in annual turnover, with margins of roughly 35 to 40%. Across all 5, the common thread is simple: understand the whole system, protect the boundaries, create evidence, and make scarce expertise travel further. From 2008 to 2024, I worked as a senior engineer at the CSIR in defense, maritime systems, and technology for special operations. These were long, regulated, multidisciplinary programs under formal Arms Corps contracts and K-standard 5000 controls. The 250 million Rand Maritime project was a multi-year program that had to move through formal controls from requirements to final delivery. Another example was a specialized simulation facility for SANDF. The acoustic wave glider work took ocean robotics from field trials into peer-reviewed research and stakeholder forums. The lesson was straightforward. Innovation earns trust through requirements, design reviews, verification, acceptance, and handover. Speed matters, but the result must survive engineering reality. Crypto Labs started with early cryptocurrency infrastructure when we often had to work out the hardware, thermals, power, networking, and monitoring for ourselves. I built and operated the systems, then turned repeated work into tools: Vast tools for host operations, DC overview for GPU data center visibility, and IPMI monitor for fleet health and remote control. The point is that new technology never works on its own. It must fit the power, cooling, networks, hardware, people, and commercial reality around it. That founder-operator discipline carries into AI operations. Gather the evidence, limit what automation may do, preserve an audit trail, and turn specialist learning into something the wider operation can use. At Vast.ai, this became a global, multi-tenant GPU cloud problem. I supported people operating physical GPU servers and customers running AI and machine learning workloads on them. The work ranged from onboarding, BIOS configuration, and marketplace listing to NVIDIA drivers, CUDA, containers, networking, PCI Express allocation, NVLink, and NVSwitch. Every operator, site, and hardware combination brought a different constraint. The real test was customer truth. If we could not diagnose, recover, and explain the system under pressure, it was not operationally mature. I supported Vast.ai from 2017 through 2024, and I am consulting to them again now. So my recommendations stay connected to live platform behavior and real customer expectations. At Hydra Host, from 2024 to 2026, the problem was making specialist infrastructure knowledge repeatable across international data center operations. I was the sole technical resource supporting the EMEA region, covering GPU and HPC escalations, customer issues, provider coordination, and bare metal systems. One result was confidential AI automation using Intel TDX. Manually configuring and provisioning a TDX-capable system took between 1 and 2 days. With Packer, Ansible, QEMU, Cloud Init, and controlled BIOS orchestration, I reduced that to under 1 hour. I also built Sindri to test, validate, publish, and deploy BIOS policy across real hardware. The lesson applies widely. Expertise scales when we encode it into controlled workflows, reproducible infrastructure, runbooks, and knowledge transfer. It does not scale through permanent heroics. The pattern I look for is specific. Scarce engineers, operators, or customer specialists spend too much time retrieving knowledge, assembling evidence, preparing repeatable documents, triaging familiar failures, or correcting handoffs. The cost is not only their time. Delivery slows, decisions vary, customers wait, and risk hides in informal workarounds. I help investigate where that friction is real and what business outcome it constrains. We establish the baseline first: cycle time, quality, review effort, and the actual business result. Then we test whether approved AI assistants can release expert time while the accountable person remains in control. AI is useful only if it improves the complete accepted workflow. We measure accepted work, not generated output. An interested person or team can surface the opportunity. A C-level sponsor must authorize the work. In most organizations, that is the CEO, managing director, COO, CTO, CIO, or chief engineer, who owns the outcome and can set a cross-functional risk boundary. The functional owner in engineering, operations, support, quality, or commercial then owns the workflow and result. IT, security, legal, people, and finance enable the controls where needed. That separation matters. Sponsorship gives the mandate. Functional ownership gives the work reality. My role is to structure discovery, keep the evidence visible, and help the group reach a sound decision. We choose the work and boundaries together. If important functions stay outside, the work will not scale. The operating rule is simple: bounded delegation with human authority. First, evidence over enthusiasm. We test an AI-assisted workflow against a real baseline and use only approved tools, information sources, and environments. Second, a named person remains accountable. AI may retrieve, analyze, draft, or recommend, but a responsible person owns every important output. We measure the complete workflow, including review, rework, quality, cost, and trust. And we stop weak experiments early. A contained failure gives us useful evidence. An unexamined failure gives us hidden risk. People need a safe place to experiment and fail properly, but it comes after the first business problem and information boundary are clear. If discovery shows a need, I can help design a short, approved learning pilot with a written safe harbor. A voluntary personal learning lane can give people private space to learn with public, synthetic, or participant-owned information. The organization records the allowance, not private prompts, outputs, history, or credentials. A weekly learning session can turn isolated experiments into shared evidence. People show a useful result, a limitation, a surprise, or a policy-compliant failure, with clear rules for participation and recording. Managed work stays inside approved tools, information, and review boundaries. Any monitoring must be explained and used for security, compliance, and shared learning, not individual productivity rankings. The exact tools are examples, not vendor decisions. The principle is to protect personal privacy, protect organizational information, and let the learning cross the boundary while the data does not. The grounded operating model starts with one real workflow. We do not begin with a product or platform. We map how the need, decisions, handoffs, constraints, tools, and evidence actually move. During Discover, we connect the original need to each decision, the AI-assisted work, the verification, and final acceptance. The accountable expert stays visible at every important point. We use the systems and governance the organization already has. A knowledge layer, natural language interface, or custom harness is added only if the evidence says it is needed. I create the structure, momentum, and evidence that connect the team's efforts, while the organization keeps ownership. The engineer in command idea comes down to one question: is the accountable expert using AI to expand capability, or simply accepting whatever the system gives back? Inside an approved workflow, a named person owns the intent, constraints, decisions, and acceptance. That person must be able to question, redirect, reject, or stop the AI-assisted work. Nothing counts as accepted without proportionate review, testing, and evidence. Where policy and data access allow it, we can observe approved workflow signals, not private content and not individual productivity. We look at who frames the problem, challenges the output, asks for evidence, and makes the final decision. The measure is accepted work, avoidable rework, verification coverage, defects, and retained human control. AI should increase capability without surrendering judgment. I use traceability and a structured delivery loop to keep the work controlled, but only after a C-level sponsor authorizes discovery and discovery identifies an approved workflow. This is not a predetermined platform or vendor commitment. Traceweaver is one method for connecting intent, approved scope, evidence, verification, and acceptance. It keeps the authority and traceability part visible. The engineering command still approves, challenges, verifies, and accepts every consequential outcome. Compound engineering is one way to move from brainstorm to bounded plan, implementation, review, and reusable learning. It supports delivery without replacing governance or accountable human judgment. Together, these methods can create evidence-backed acceptance and reusable practice around one approved workflow. Discovery determines whether they fit, whether existing systems already do the job, and what the accountable expert must verify. A sensible first engagement is a paid, bounded 30-day discover phase. Prove and decide follow only if they are separately scoped and approved. During discover, we listen and map. We speak to the relevant leaders and teams, understand the real workflow, find repeated friction, clarify information and authority boundaries, and establish the baseline. The result is a ranked opportunity and risk map that leadership can actually use. Then we select no more than one or two opportunities. Each needs a business owner, a clear problem, approved information boundaries, a success measure, and a stop rule. If separately approved, Prove tests the opportunity with real users. We measure cycle time, quality, review effort, cost, and acceptance, then deliberately continue, change, or stop. If Decide is approved, we strengthen what worked, document the controls, and produce a practical roadmap. The starting question remains: where are capable people repeatedly spending time on work that should not require their level of expertise? If this describes your organization, the next step is a short fit conversation. We do not need sensitive information or a tool decision. We need one suspected workflow, the business outcome it constrains, and the executive who could sponsor a bounded discover phase. That first conversation needs to answer 4 practical questions. Is the problem material? Is there a C-level sponsor? Will the functional owner take part? And is a paid 30-day discover phase worth scoping? If not, we stop there. If yes, we agree the mandate, information boundaries, and commercial scope before any access, purchase, or operational change. That keeps the first decision small and honest. Let's test whether there is a fit. Each approved phase leaves behind something useful that the organization owns, a prioritized opportunity and risk map, measured evidence from 1 or 2 controlled proofs, and a decision-ready roadmap showing what to scale, redesign, or stop. Each phase earns the next one. If all 3 proceed, day 90 ends with a clean continuation decision. We either conclude and leave the evidence with the organization or separately scope what comes next. My offer is practical. Find the real constraint, protect the boundaries, prove the value, and leave the organization stronger. If this sounds relevant, bring one suspected workflow and we can test the fit without sharing sensitive information. Start with authority, scale with evidence.